Hello everyone, welcome to the course Disability Studies in India, Historical, Social and Cultural Perspectives. So, in this module, I am going to talk about theorizing disability, stigma, identity and subjectivity. See, this chapter is going to be, these lectures in this modules are going to be a little bit heavy. For a very particular reason is that it is more dependent on theoretical understanding. So, my attempt would be to explain this to you in detail. I will go slow today, right. I will be very slow in fact. I will keep telling you all the slides, what they are talking about, how they are explained. So, you have to pay attention to each and every slides and words that I utter. Why I am telling you this? Because we are entering into theoretical domain. I already have covered some theoretical understanding, but this one is more about stigma, right, because this is a one important phenomena that goes along with disability like norms, stigma as well. Then we have a second important term, identity. I have already talked about identity, but this time I am not going to talk identity in isolation, because in the previous module, in the previous lectures which we are talking about, we discussed identity, but what is identity and what people have to say about identity and all that. But in this lecture, in this modules, when I am going to talk about identity in relation to disability, in relation to stigma, in relation to subjectivity, and then subjectivity, right, which is a core component of cultural studies, right. Foucault is talking about, Butler is talking about, Derrida in fact is talking about, you name one cultural theorist, Stuart Hall talking about, right. So, this is why what I will do, that we will pick up one by one. But why, before we get into this, the first question is, why are we trying to read this, why we are going to understand this? As I already, you have understood the significance of stigma, identity and subjectivity, because when I will enter into literature, when I will enter into films, when I will enter into these popular culture, how they project their representation, the politics of representation, then you will require the understanding of this, because you cannot analyze a text until and unless you have a deeper understanding of how identity is constituted, constructed, so on and so forth, and also subjectivity. What is the subjectivity? Subjectivity, subjectification, right? All these are related to cultural studies domain, but they are also very important in understanding the discourse of disability. Let us go to the slide number 1. So, here I will just go slow and talk about simple ideas, so that you can, when I get into the deeper concept, you can understand. Stigma is a powerful social force that shapes how people and groups are perceived, affecting everything from mental health to social economic opportunities, right. This is, look at this, powerful social force, right, powerful social force that shape how people and groups are perceived, affecting everything from mental health to socio-economic opportunities. Defined broadly, a stigma is a mark of disgrace or discredit that society attaches to people or group based on particular traits, behavior or condition, right, rooted in historical, cultural and psychological context. Stigma affects various areas of human life, leading to discrimination, social exclusion and even self-doubt in those affected. Before I define stigma, right, as you could see on the slide that I am going to define stigma and its mechanism. What is stigma as a powerful force? What it does? It discredits you, right. It makes you feel as if you are, like, it takes away your confidence. It makes you feel that you cannot do this, right. there are certain particular traits on that base a stigma is generated, right. And because of a stigma, the effect I am talking about, look at the effect that it has on people with disabilities. It works as a force which pulls you back, right. It's like creates a condition where you feel less confident, as if you cannot do this, as if you yourself start realizing that you are not part of it. That is the power of a stigma, right. Society creates a stigma through that it disciplines you, right. It attaches a certain identity with you, and it is very difficult for stigmatized people to get out of it, to remove, to wash out those identities. So, that is a power of stigma is. So, look at the next slide please. So, here you see that the term stigma is originally referred to a physical mark or brand on the body signifying disgrace. That is a key term, right. Today, it encompasses both visible and invisible traits that society deems deviant or undesirable, such as mental health condition, physical disabilities, or marginalized identities. Psychologist Irving Goffman's seminal work on stigma, which I am going to discuss in detail in the next chapter, outlines three types: physical deformities, blemish or individual character, example addiction, criminal records, and tribal stigma. Look at this: physical, individual character, and tribal, race, religion, nationality. Each type of stigma is socially constructed and maintained through social interactions, cultural narrative, and institutional policies. Let me explain this to you first, right? What are these three stigmas are? Let us talk about the first one, that is about physical deformities. See, I am not going to discuss disability in this lecture. I am just giving an theoretical apparatus framework, and then I will switch to disability in the next coming lectures. But first we need to know what we are talking about, how can we apply that, how we can think about it. So, that is why when I speak, when I teach, my focus is not always on disability, but my focus is on other theoretical conceptual framework. Once you get it, you can analyze disability, right. Once you find this accessible, once you understand these concepts, you yourself can explain what disability is, or for example, any identity, sexual identity, political identity, cultural identity, disabled identity, any identity, right. So, that is why stigma is not something limited to only people with disabilities, right. As I will talk about, there are individual characters, or let us say for example, tribal stigma, right. So, let us talk about first, which is talking about physical, right. Let us say about physical deformities. Let us say if you are a dwarf, your height is normally not good enough, or you have dented face, deformed face, disability. So, anything that is not normal on your body, you got it. So, this is, let us say, it may be also not only just impairment, right. If suppose you have some hunch on your back, right. So, this is all, they are also like, this is also one type of stigma that becomes stigmatized, right, because of it is based on your physical appearance, basically, if I have to put it in simple, right. So, people perceive you not in the way we perceive people others, they disgrace you. Your disgrace is based on your physical appearance. That's a one. Second, we have individual character. Let's say, for example, if in a particular society, right, alcohol is bad, right, and alcohol is not good, but you drink. So, your disgrace is based on your characters, right? What kind of a character you are, what you are, something that is prohibited but you are drinking, like alcohol consumptions. So, you are disgraced in a society because you are doing something which you are not supposed to do, right. Let us say, for example, if you have gone to the prison and you come back, how people will look at you? Oh, he is not a good person, he is notorious, he is evil, right. So, you are disgraced because you have gone to the jail. This is the second. This is not on the based on physical appearance. This is based on the act that you commit, which is not allowed, right. Even the physical appearance is, a particular physical appearance is not permitted, like you are not supposed to look like this. However, it is your fault or not, forget about it. However, it is not natural or natural, I do not know, right. So, this is the second. The second is physical appearance, individual acts. Third is tribal stigma, which is basically based on race, religion or nationality, right. So, for example, the nationality that you belong to, let us say, for example, there are certain countries in the world which are not respected. Let us say, I mean, to put it in a simple word, let us say, for example, most of the time India was not treated good enough in other countries. Let us say, if you say, where do you come from? I come from India. So, they disgrace you because of your nationality. So, nationality, they say, then the black people were discriminated, they were stigmatized on the basis of the color that they have. But obviously, color is not individual traits, it is not individual characteristics, but it is rather based on the place which you come from. So, for example, African identity, right. I am sure that you have read entire American literature, Mark Twain and others, where they are talking about Negroes, right. Negroes were stigmatized just on the basis of the nationality that they belong to, because of the skin color that they have, right. So, here I am trying to explain to you that there are three types of stigma explained by Erving Goffman in his book called Stigma Notes on the Spoiled Identity, right. So, these identity which is based on these three different characteristics, like one is physical appearance, second one is nationalities and third one is act, right, the kind of act you are indulged in. So, this leads to stigma, right, this pushes you to have an stigmatized identity. So, these three are important to understand that how people's identity are not considered noble, right. So, the very act of nobility is based on the kind of a place you belong to, the kind of appearance that you have and the kind of physical appearance you have. And what it does, now the second question arises out of it, that why does this happen, right? Why does this happen? Why is it so? What is the role of stigma, for example, right? The role of stigma is to produce a normal society. Let us say, for example, Eurocentric approach, Western centric approach, which looks at other color, other caste, other culture as an inferior one, as a spoiled one, and then it makes you feel inferior, despite the fact that you are inferior or you are not, but you internalize these works as an apparatus to make you feel disgraced, right? And out of this disgrace, you internalize that, oh no, I am not good enough. So, these are the cultural sign that we need to question, that we need to interrogate. As I have been talking about that, we need to produce a counter narrative until and unless we do this, right. So, now you see we produced counter narrative, and now Indians which were disgraced in the West, now they are getting a position which has respect and dignity. How is it possible? Because this became possible out of the very fact that this second like third stigma, which is called tribal stigma, was challenged, right. The way, and as I told you in the slide, that it is constantly reproduced through the representation, through the narratives. Like narrative has a very important role. In fact, I have talked to you, so I am not going to talk to you again about it in details, but the point is that these narratives constantly reproduce it, right, constantly produce tribal stigma, physical stigma, and the blemishness of individual character. All right. So, let us go to the next slide, please. In the next slide, if you see, I am talking about two main mechanisms how stigma operates. Stigma operates through two significant mechanisms. One is social labeling. What is a social labeling? When a society labels a person or a group as other, it establishes boundaries, creating an us versus them dichotomy, right. So, this is how society labels a person or a group as other. This separation justifies the exclusion or mistreatment of the stigmatized group, right. This is the first one, social labeling, how society labels a person. Second one is stereotyping and prejudice. Labeling often leads to stereotypings, where specific traits are seen to be true of the entire group, like fueling prejudice and discrimination. These assumptions limit opportunities for stigmatized people and reinforce the dominant group's power. So, here what I discuss in the slides is two things. The one is how social labeling works and how stereotyping and prejudices are constantly maintained, they are perpetuated. So, social labeling simply like society excludes you by putting yourself in a one box, that you are not capable, you are inferior, you belong to that group, and that happens. So, there is a clear dichotomy, there is a clear division between us versus them, right. That is how it works, that is how it operates. So, social labeling is there. Through the social labeling, it operates, stigmatized identity is produced as a spoiled one. And then the second one that I was talking about is stereotypes and prejudice, right. That what labeling often leads to, what is the result of that labeling, right. What is the result of that labeling? The result of that labeling is leading to stereotyping and prejudice. So, as I have already discussed this in the previous lectures, I am not going to reiterate them, but the point what I am trying to explain to you is that how social labeling leads to prejudice and how social labeling leads to also stereotypes, and through this spoiled identity is constantly working, right. It is always there. You feel you have internalized yourself as a weak or inferior. Let us go to the next slide, please. So, in the next slide, if you notice, I am talking about social implication, like why I am talking about this, right. I am talking about this, how this impacts our both mental health and self identity, which leads to people to experience anxiety, depression, I will talk about it in details, and social isolation. So, people who internalize social stigma often feel shame, guilt, and low self-worth. Look at these three things. Like what does it do? Once you have internalized social stigma, you feel shame, you feel guilt, and you feel low self-worth. So, this self-stigmatization can create a cycle of withdrawal and further marginalization, as people may avoid seeking help or support out of fear of a judgment. All right. So, before I move to the next slide, which is talking about the implications of this, which is very severe, right. Let me give you an example that would be easy for us to understand. Once, let us say for example, Let me take a very simple example which will be quite easy. For example, you could not clear IIT exam, right? You appeared in the IIT exam, you couldn't clear. And your students, your friends, your fellow people, your relatives, they all are IITians, they have cleared the exam. Now, imagine a situation where everyone is IITians and you fail to clear the IIT exam, right? What would happen? People will always make you feel that you are not good enough to study, right? You failed, like your brother did, your sister did, your relatives did, but you couldn't do that. This constant mechanism will produce a kind of discourse where it will create a kind of a doubt on your self-worth. However, it's possible that you may be good in other things, you may you excel other fields, you may reach to new heights, you become meritorious in other places. But this disgrace which is constantly working in your family will put your spirit down, and then after a point of time you will internalize, oh yes, I am not good enough, right? Look at this, how does it operate, how does it work? And due to this labeling, right, and this prejudice that if you are not able to clear the exam, which means that you are not good enough as a student in the society, you are not good to become a student, you are not good to be a student, right? So this doubt is created, like labeling and then producing prejudice against you. Third, as I was talking in the side, you feel depressed and isolation. Why isolation? I mean, you cannot go to a party, you cannot go to play a game because you realize that they all are earning money, they are all qualified and not able to do that, right. So, slowly and gradually, even if they do not isolate you, you isolate yourself because you feel you are not one of them. That is what I was talking about, us versus them, right. So, you feel that you are not one of them, and then automatically social isolation is working, depression is working, fear, the constant fear that you have that you are not worthy enough to be a student, right. So, these are the important to understand stigma. That is why this entire lecture I have devoted to talk just on stigma, so that you can see how does it work, how does it operates. So, look at the next slide please. So, in the next slide I am talking about implications, right, which are extremely severe. For example, employment discrimination, right. Let us say those with criminal records, mental health conditions or disability may face obstacles in securing job due to preconceived notion about their competence or reliability, right. This is the first one, employment discrimination. Healthcare access, stigmatized people, right, particularly those with mental health issues like diseases like HIV, AIDS may avoid seeking medical help, fearing prejudice from healthcare providers or peers, right. Let me talk first employment discrimination, which is really good. I mean, I am sure that you have filled many forms and you will be filling many forms. So, you will see there is a section where they ask you, have you ever put in the bus, have you ever been debarred from the institutions, have you ever been expelled from your classes or anything. These are the questions where they are asking you yes or no. My simple question is this: if you are appearing for the job opportunities, why are they asking these questions? These questions are being asked to ensure your past characters, right. And I mean, I tell you this even because when you fill the application for the passport, right, if once your passport is rejected, the visa, if you are like say passport is also has a consequence and also the visa, then people doubt that whether you are good enough or you have a problem, what if you create again a problem in society, something like this. So, this is how it is like you are stigmatized, oh you have already gone to jail, you have been expelled from the institution, right, you have been barred from your employment, your employers. to continue your jobs. So, these things, right, has now constantly working as a stigma. Still after that, there is a possibility that because you did something bad and now you are punished, now you have become a nice person, you are not indulged in anything, you are doing good, but that stigma will still continue. People will keep looking you not what you are today, but what you were yesterday, what you did in the past. So, this is what I am talking about, employment discrimination. Then there is a possibility that employer will see, oh, he did not continue. In fact, like I can tell you, there are my friends who are in private jobs, and there is a one question that why did you leave that place? So they try to judge you whether you are expelled or you left because you are getting less salary, so on and so forth. So employment discrimination is also because of certain stigma. Let's say, for example, one thing I tell you, I mean, it's a positive stereotype, like in US people think that Indians are hard working people, they are good people. So getting job for Indians in US is easy, they are employed and provided you get a visa. But this is not true, I will not name, for other nationalities, because they are stigmatized as they are dishonest, they don't work properly, they are not punctual, so on and so forth, right. So, there is an employment discrimination. It may be that it has nothing to do with you. Maybe the people belong to that particular country, that person is bad, not the country is bad. But because of that nationality, you are also stigmatized, and that is leading to employment discrimination. All right, so I will not like you can see the slide, you can read by yourself. And then also healthcare access, right. Even medical institution, there are many awareness campaign. They have told that AIDS are just a disease, it has nothing to do with the morality. But since there are certain disease which are tagged with morality, so people stigmatize you, people treat you bad, they disgrace you also on the basis of the stigma of health that you have or the disease that you have, all right. So there are n number of stigma that goes around, like cultural stigma, political stigma, right. So what are the strategies that we can do? What are the strategies that we have? So public education is very important. We must have education. Awareness program, right? That's not true. We have to work on this, and that's myth. It need to be busted, right? Person who was bad yesterday is bad today as well. No. What if he's working great and he's doing good? Supporting legislation and policies, right? We should have some legal mechanism as well, where they should be given opportunities again to work or something like, and community based intervention. Like let's say, for example, in the lot of marriage system, we see that widows are not allowed, old people are not allowed, which is kind of a stigma that we have, that they aesthetically they will not look good. But community must take certain steps to intervene and ensure that all the people, whether they are old, they are widowed, they are divorced, whatever category they belong to, they all have a right to access the place equally, all right. So there are many mechanisms that you can see, and this will help you to understand how we can reduce the stigma. To conclude my lecture, I would say that stigma is an important component when we are engaging with the discourse of people with disabilities. We should also understand that how stigma operates, how it functions, and what are the severe consequences it produces for people with disabilities. Our job is to provide awareness, our job is to talk more about it, to discuss so often in the public spaces, so that they can also be part of our inclusive space or our culture of our communities, right? Because the country in which we are living in, it treats everyone equally despite caste, culture, community, cuisine, cloth, or you name any discrimination, you name any categories, they are not discriminated, right? But because of certain problems, still we see there are problems in terms of equal opportunities not given to everyone. So with this, I would like to end my lecture. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your patient listening and bearing with me. See you next time. Thank you once again.